In the last video, we covered the Carter House and the Battle of Franklin. The Carter House was used as the first battlefield hospital, but when the small place was quickly overrun with dying soldiers, they moved them to the nearby mansion, which had much more room for surgeries. Appalachia, the mountains, are like no other. From its rigid terrain, beautiful wildlife, to the people that live their lives here, to the strange, unexplained stories that folks share. Join me while I share this amazing place, one story at a time. Could you imagine going about your daily life when all of a sudden thousands of men screaming as they charge across the field 1 mile away down at the Carter Plantation? Cannons ring out, muskets exploding with the sound of musket balls bouncing off the walls. Would you be in fear that your house is next? Imagine seeing wagon loads of injured pouring into your yard, then soldiers storming your house, turning it upside down in order to use it as a big hospital. How would you handle it? I'm not sure I could handle it myself. Let's dig into the history before the war and find out the story of the Carnton Plantation, where it came from, who built it, and when. The Carnton Mansion is a 3-story red brick home built in 1826 by Randall McGavock. It's on raised limestone foundation. It has a gabled roof, a 2-story revival style porch. It has 4 columns holding up the second floor porch. And the place has 11 rooms. Wallpaper, faux painting, and carpet decorate each. The passageway downstairs appears exactly as it did in 1864. The parlor has a beautiful fireplace mantel. The mantel houses an old working clock and a 200-piece china set belonging to the McGavock family. If you look closely at the floors, you will notice dark red stains. Those are the remnants of the 1864 Battle of Franklin. The blood of the victims of war spilled all over the floor. There is a rocking chair inside the parlor that was a gift to the family by no other than President Andrew Jackson itself. There are cedar trees along the driveway and back walkway. There was a beautiful flower garden on the grounds as well. It was long forgotten, but then, through research and photos, it was recreated in 1997, exactly as it was. There are daffodils, hostas, and peonies. There is a 2-acre cemetery where the soldiers are laid to rest. The United Daughters of the Confederacy maintain the cemetery. So, just how did Randall McGavock afford such an immaculate place? What's his story? Randall was born in 1768 in Virginia. He then migrated to Nashville, where he became a politician. In 1824, he served as mayor for 1 year. He became acquainted with President James Polk and was very good friends with President Andrew Jackson. The President Andrew Jackson lived in nearby Hermitage. He often visited McGavock's. The name Carnton comes from the Gaelic word cairn, which means pile of stones, often marking a gravesite. In 1843, Randall passed, leaving the place to his son John. Now let's move on to the Civil War era itself. John wanted to fight, but he was just too old to enlist at the age of 46. So instead, he organized groups of soldiers, and his wife sold the uniforms for relatives and friends. Concerned that the war was getting too close to Franklin, John gathered all of his slaves and sent them to Louisiana to keep them from being stolen. Soldiers took thousands of dollars of grains and horses and cattle and timber from the plantation. 1,750 Confederate soldiers died at Franklin, and 4 generals' bodies were kept on the back porch of the plantation. The names of the 4 generals were Patrick Cleburne, John Adams, Ortho Straw, and Hiram Granberry. The McGavocks treated 300 soldiers themselves, not including the others treated by the doctor. Reports say that Mrs. Gavock's dress was soaked in the blood of the soldiers, and her 2 children provided basic help to the surgeon. As the troops advanced, the dead was left behind, and the citizens of Franklin buried the bodies, 2,500 in total. Over the next year and a half, the markers that were on the graves were stolen. So John and his wife donated 2 acres of land, and the citizens of Franklin donated $5 per soldier to help cover the cost. The cemetery removal was so that the graves would be preserved for years to come. The names and information were recorded for each soldier, and Carrie kept up with them until her death in 1905. Then her son, Winder, took over the operation of the family and cemetery. Sadly, in 1907, he would pass, leaving it all to his widow and children. The widow packed her stuff and her children, and they moved into Franklin, abandoning the place altogether. 2 years later, a tornado tore the eastern wing completely off the house. And 2 years later, for the first time in over a century, the house was sold to someone not a family member. Then it just sold time and time again, falling deeper into disrepair. Finally, in 1977, the Carnton Association was formed, and they raised the funds to purchase the house and 10 acres of land. Then, an additional 38 more acres were bought from a former doctor. An extensive restoration went underway, and it took more than a decade. But finally, Carnton was put back to its former glory. Even the beautiful garden lost to time was restored. And finally, the Carnton was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And it stands today as a reminder of our sad past. May we never forget. Well, folks, I want to thank you for sitting and listening to the history of the Carnton Plantation. Well, I appreciate you listening. We love you to pieces. And I'll see you next time.